Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of Sawyer Somm.
Hi.
I am Adolfo Foronda, the regular guy here, and this is Sommelier extraordinaire.
Chris Sawyer and SawyerSomm.com.
Yeah. So, what are we going to do here, Chris? And with this whole podcast show thing.
Well, right now we just got to start off right. We're in the middle of summer right now, or we're getting into it. It's kind of July. Here we go, right into the warm season. And I thought I'd bring some fun kinds of wines. We're going to talk a little bit about a white wine, a rosé, and a red wine. Why I would be pairing these things this summer.
Very nice.
As we get back in focus.
Yeah.
Or to make everyone focused.
Yeah. So if you guys experience some of this video, if you're watching, for those of you that are watching and not listening on the audio, we apologize for this camera's not behaving nicely.
It wants to be our friend, but it's having a very hard time.
That will change eventually.
And I can't bribe it with wine, unfortunately.
Yeah, but we are drinking something lovely, right? What are we doing?
This is indeed a lovely wine. So nice white wine, looks beautiful just the way we're checking it out. Oh. Smells beautiful, tastes beautiful. Let's check it out.
Oh, yeah.
Nice, bright, fresh fruit flavors. A nice little bit of citrus, a little bit of peach, some really nice melon notes to it. And I brought it just because it's one of my favorite brands.
Okay.
We've got a little Tobless Creek here, and this is the Vermin Tino. So not many people have heard of Vermin Tino in the United States yet, but it is becoming a very cool style right now.
Right.
It's an Italian variety and a French variety. So if we were in France right now, we would be calling this roll, and that's Rolle, roll. And in Italy, it means, well, the same name as Vermin Tino. So this is the new vintage. This is 2015, young, fresh, fun, great with Italian food, great with French food, but going on the lighter style. So you're talking about salads, you're talking about fruit compotes, you're talking about nice kinds of fish dishes with a little bit of fish salt or fresh fruit salsa. There we go. There we go.
Helps.
But it's from their estate right down in Paso Robles. I love to visit Tobless Creek anytime I'm down in that area.
Paso Robles, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I brought a couple wines from down there today.
Very nice.
So if you're passing through California, you just happen to be going south of San Francisco and to LA, or vice versa, coming up from the kind of LA area and going right through there, this is a great place to go visit. I've been there so many times. They're great friends of mine. The Haas family, who brought this brand to basically to America, and this is part of Chateau de Beaucastel over in the lower part of the Rhone Valley, which is known better as Chateau de Beaucastel, and Châteauneuf-du-Pape is the region.
Wow.
So this is a great version. I'm seeing a little bit more of this style here in the United States, and another one that you might want to look into as far as something you might not have heard of, but you might find a bottle of it, is Picpoul. And Picpoul is one from the French Riviera, much more known down there than it is even in the lower part of the Rhone Valley. But this is a great style, especially for these hotter weather conditions. And as we get into refreshment, it's all about refreshment during the summertime.
So as of today, like retail pricing for this thing, me being the consumer,
this is about $30, $25 to $30. So really nice wine. Wow. You're not going to find it everywhere, but you're going to find it at some great restaurants. You're going to find it at some very, very good retail shops. And a little bit, you can always go to toblesscreek.com and buy it there.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so that's a great one that we're starting out with. Let's take another little sip here.
So, Chris, while we're
besides being out of focus right now, which I never really get that out of focus. I've been all over the place. I just got back from Telluride. Ooh, salsa. Now you're talking. I just got back from Telluride, in the Telluride Wine Festival up there. We did quite a few seminars. I did 8 seminars myself.
Wow.
Worked with great chefs, star chefs from across the nation, including Georges Perrier, who's very famous for being probably the most iconic French chef alive in America right now.
Right.
And he has a great movie that was made about him in a documentary called King George.
Yeah.
And so we had a dinner and a movie with him, and we had all these great chefs from across the nation that were doing interpretations of his style of food.
Very cool.
There. And if you haven't been to Telluride, it is an amazing place to be.
I've heard great snowboarding in the winter.
Oh, of course. But it's just so beautiful in the springtime and the summertime.
It must be.
And I'll say one thing too about getting in and out of focus is that
Bust the bottle out.
Bust the bottle out. That the greatest thing there may be is just riding the gondola. I just have never had this much experience of riding the gondola during the daytime, nighttime, or anything like that, especially if it's not snowing there.
Yeah.
So it's just a fantastic experience. And, the people there love great food. It's a great thing. And you're at 9,000 feet just to begin with.
And what's great too, you guys, what you can do if you want to see what Chris is up to, he updates Instagram a lot too. So you should totally follow him there. I got to see a lot of his pictures of what was happening in Telluride, and it was a lot of fun. So how do they follow you on Instagram?
Yeah, that's Sawyer Sommelier on Instagram and Twitter. And then for the regular, Facebook, it's Christopher Sawyer Sommelier.
Cool. Yeah.
So having some great times. And, these kinds of wines in the summertime, even if you're here on the West Coast or you're in, someplace like Colorado, or even on the East Coast or wherever you're at. I mean, these kinds of wines, as we're talking about here, like the Tablas Creek, it's just so fantastic. And this is a great version to be tasting right now. I just really like this wine a lot, and it's tasty.
Yeah, it really is. Good stuff.
Mirror in, mirror out. So let's talk about the next wine while we finish this off.
This is a good daytime wine, I feel like, too. Outside daytime.
Well, that's the other thing is cheese courses would be really nice with this wine. Once again, we're talking about the Tablas Creek still. This would be great with cheese courses. This would be great with starting salads. Another good thing, like spring rolls, Asian food.
Yeah.
For sure. Sushi, a lot of fish.
Yeah.
And the good thing is it does have a little bit of weight. It's not a super lightweight kind of white wine.
That fruit pops out of that.
It really does. I love it. So it's all from their estate, and this is organically farmed. A lot of it's biodynamic too. So they really do care about their vineyards. And once again, it's one of the reasons you need to go visit them.
So for the layman, what do you mean by biodynamic?
Biodynamic is a process of following what's happening in your vineyards 365 days of the year. So there's certain applications that you can do. The actual process is very unique. You can be certified through Demeter, which is a unique operation, but that's a lot of paperwork. Some people want to go through it, and some people don't. And I think that just as far as their organic certification and their practices that follow the biodynamics,
it just above and beyond.
It just really means that they 365 days of the year they care about that vineyard, and they really never stop thinking about it in their applications. Actually, one of the cool things I saw there one time was just weed eating and all this kind of stuff that you do with weed eaters. They actually kind of burn around. They just burn the tops off the weeds. Wow. They've got a little flame thing that goes out, and just that's how they take care of their weeds.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a unique way. It just kills them and they're done.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that.
Paso Robles.
So let's come back in frame real quick. I'm going to pour us a new wine in a second here. J. Lore, the Jester. So this is a nice rosé, Grenache rosé. This is a 2015 vintage from Paso Robles once again. We're talking about these Rhone style varieties. Right now, there's a lot of talk about Rhone style varieties. When I was up in Telluride, we did a whole seminar called Case Syrah Shiraz. So we were talking about the Rhone varieties, which are Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Cinsault, Counois, all these kinds of red varieties, and Grenache is right up there at the tops. And I'll say this, a lot of people don't know that much about Grenache yet, but maybe they've had Garnacha from Spain and different areas. It is actually the largest or most widely planted red grape variety in the world. And there's also Grenache Blanc, which we have quite a bit of here in the United States, and we're seeing a little bit more of that now. So that Grenache Rosé is a very unique one. So this is from J. Lohr Winery. They're really one of my favorite wineries from down there too. And you know, Steve Lohr and Lawrence Lohr and I went on a great cruise last year. We were in the Mediterranean, and we were trying this wine and some of their other wines with Mediterranean food right on the Mediterranean. So that was really unique.
So again, people, if you want to check out Chris's pictures about this trip that he's referring to, go back in his Instagram history. There's some insane pictures I highly recommend checking out. It's crazy.
Yeah, we were eating crazy food.
Yeah,
we were doing everything. But, you know, once again, you're in an area where you really need a wine like this. You need something to cool the palate. You need rosé, and rosé is super in vogue. You know, I just did the big rosé today tasting in Sonoma County. That was over 100 rosés that we went through, me and a group of 9 other judges. And we found some great winners there too, and I'll have those results coming up on my website on SawyerSomm.com.
For your wine connoisseurs out there, for sure, you know, rosé is the stuff. But you know, for the layman, you know, I was at like a party recently, and they're like, "What kind of wine do you want to drink?" And I'm like, "Rosé," and they're like, "Rosé?" You know what I mean? It's sort of the tail end, you know, that's happening right now. There's just sort of catching back.
You know, a great thing that if the group is a little bit older, say, you know, kind of the baby boomers in that generation and above, I always say, who here, your first wine you ever tasted was Matus or Lancers? And that was that pink wine that was kind of sweet. And then we got into the white Zinfandel movement and all of these kinds of things. So sweetness often gets associated with that color. And the problem is this is not a sweet wine. And if you go to Europe, they are not sweet there in general. So when you come over here and you start seeing pink wines and you have this kind of problem with experiences you've had in the past, it's time to get used to this style, because this is really in vogue. This is really nice. And this is, let's see, there's a teeny bit of Grenache Blanc in here too. So it says 20% Grenache Blanc. And to be really honest, I haven't tasted this new vintage yet. So all of us are going to taste this together right now. So let's do it. I'm going to finish this off real quick.
And then also let's talk about soon about Paso Robles in general, because you know, a lot of people.
I'll be honest with you. When I was a kid and we used to drive down in that area, we'd go by Paso Robles. We might get gas there, but it wasn't a place to stop per se. It was known for sulfur, and the sulfur springs in right downtown in the area. But it wasn't really known for much except for basic kinds of grapes that were like Zinfandel. Cabernet wasn't in vogue yet. And it was just a place where you could grow grapes, because it gets hot there. There's no doubt that this area is a very hot area. So let's see.
Oh gosh.
Magic. But today it is as well known for the Rhone varieties as any place in the United States. It's very well known for Cabernet, and sometime on the show soon we'll have some of the Cabernet from down in Paso Robles. But I give a lot of credit to, once again, Tablas Creek for bringing in a lot of these clones to the United States and actually basing their winery right down there. You also have wineries like Justin and some of these other well-known wineries that kind of led that whole pack down there. Wild Horse is another good one that many people might have known in the past that is associated with this area. But it's known for the Rhone varieties, Bordeaux varieties, and of course, Zinfandel. It's a little bit too hot for Chardonnay. There is a teeny bit of Pinot Noir grown there, and it's mainly in this small area called the Templeton Gap area. And it's this interesting little zone where the wind comes right off the ocean and flows right into the Templeton Gap. It's a little dicey as far as the vintages go. Some of the vintages are cooler, some of them are warmer. And so you want a cooler one if you can get it for this kind of style of Pinot Noir. But we're talking about Grenache here. And Grenache is very well known from the southern part of the Rhone Valley too. And so we're talking about the Chateau de Beaucastel kind of area that we were talking about with Talbot's Creek, but we're talking about Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And that area is around the town of Avignon. And Avignon is really interesting. See this color here?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
So Avignon is a beautiful area. It was very well known for part of the entire order of the church. The Catholic Church came there. It wasn't the 10th century, I believe it was the 9th century when they came there and set up a new part of their church right there, because it was not, the order was not in place in Rome and around that area at that time. So they set up a new part there, and that church still exists, and it is a historical landmark. And a lot of the other areas around there are just so amazing. But what this area is best known for is this very stony, kind of gnarly kinds of a rock that sits all over the vineyards. Every time I go there and I look at these vineyards, I feel like I'm going to get a sprained ankle just looking at this stuff. Like, I can't believe how people actually, pick the grapes in there.
Wow.
But I will say one thing: it has a very important reason why you do not take these rocks out of there, and that is because in the afternoons you get what you call the Mistral Wind. The Mistral Wind is this wind that just comes in. It goes just right out of the Alps, and it comes straight down into that valley. And it's so strong that I got to be really honest with you. I got out of the car the first time I'd ever gone to Chateau de Beaucastel,
right,
and I felt like I was wearing a toupee. Yeah. I felt like my hair was lifting off my head, and it was going super Trump on me. But the fact is that I really I learned a lot about that. And so the reason the rocks are so important is because they conduct heat. And so during the day, when the heat's very warm, the rocks get warm. So when that wind comes in the late afternoons, you can really still feel the heat from those rocks. And so they're still ripening, even though in most cases, like you go out here to Carneros, in Napa and Sonoma, it gets just too cold. Those grapes are done for the day. But if you have these hot rocks underneath there, it keeps going for a little while longer. And it's a very, very important thing about the tradition and all of the ways that they pick the grapes. And so they have to figure out these rocks, and it's an important part of it. So this is from Paso Robles too, and it is a warm area just in general. And J. Lohr, the wine company, has been around for a long time. Jerry Lohr founded this back in the early 80s, and it's a fantastic winery. One of the best I think value wines out there. This is a little bit higher end, obviously, for their Jester and all these kinds of Rhone varieties that they're doing. But I think for the value and what you get for J. Lohr, it's one of my favorite brands. And that's why I really love working with their wines, and why when they send me samples, I always get excited, because I want to find out what's new with this winery. They actually have a very nice tasting room in the San Jose area too. So it's not just Paso Robles. It's also in the San Jose area that you can taste their wines as well.
These two really played well together too. These two wines. I could see having a party and having a couple of these bottles around.
I was tasting a rosé like this recently, and it made me so hungry for what we'd call a nice kind of fish stew, just with that little bit of red sauce, that little bit of saffron in there, a little bit of curry saffron, paella kind of stuff. But if you look at where the Rhone Valley is, it comes right out of the Alps like this, and then breaks down and goes into the ocean, the Mediterranean, right by Marseille. And so the thing about Marseille and what they're so well known for is this kind of fish stew, all these kinds of things you get there. San Francisco Bay Area here, we have plenty of those examples, but rosé in the summertime, it has so many uses.
Right. For those of you listening and watching right now, we're recording at a Marin. We're from Sonoma County, which is the stone's throw away here, so that's why we're referring to Bay Area here and stuff when we talk about here.
Yeah. So I just think that, these Rhone varieties are really hot right now. J. Lohr is a great brand to know. Talbot's Creek's a great brand to know. But just to get into the Rhone varieties too, there's a couple different organizations I would highly recommend that you check into. One is the Rhone Rangers. And the Rhone Rangers is a fantastic a group that's throughout the United States, and both of these really are. But it's just a great organization. They just did a big tasting in San Francisco. I couldn't be there, unfortunately, this year because I was judging the San Francisco International Wine Competition, and those results are out too. So look up San Francisco International Wine Competition. We'll talk about some of those winners coming up here. And the other one would be Hospice de Rhone. Now, Hospice de Rhone is one of those great organizations that was really setting the precedence for what the Rhone varieties would be like here in the United States. And guess where they were founded? Down in Paso Robles. So we're tasting two examples of Rhone varietals from the Paso Robles area. And this year, Hospice de Rhone was back. It's been about 5 years since we had it up here. And I'll tell you, anyone that likes the Rhone varieties, anyone that's fallen in love with Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Viognier for the whites, Roussanne, Marsanne, Picpoul, all these kinds of different varieties, it's definitely back on in Paso Robles, and I was so happy to be there again this year. I'm talking with all these great French producers from the Rhone Valley, Australian producers, people from different places around the world that really love these styles of wine. And we have plenty here in California, but also Washington State, a little bit of the Southern Oregon. Virginia is very big in the Rhones right now. Go figure, but it is just what it is. They are great grapes, and they are fantastic to really explore a little bit more of during this this summer season right now, because all this fresh food that we've got, the great salads that we're having, berries, fresh berries, all of these things, things on the barbecue. I mean, these are the reasons that we have these kinds of wines, and they make so much of a difference right now.
Yeah. So, Chris, I just realized that we didn't even do our introductions. I'm
bit.
Adolfo Foronda. I'm just a regular guy that's been chasing around Chris. I'm a tech guy, really, from Nerdstalker. If you guys want to check that out, nerdstalker.com. We have another podcast. And Chris, introduce yourself.
Yeah, Chris
Please.
Sawyer, Sommelier to the Stars.
Obviously,
or
he knows his stuff.
As you know, my website will tell you more about that. But SawyerSomm.com is my website. National wine writer. I've been doing that for about 25 years. I've been a sommelier for 23 years, so more than 2 decades in both those categories. I do a lot of speaking engagements all around the nation. Just got back from the Telluride Wine Festival, where I was the wine director, already working on Flavor Napa Valley, which will be coming up next year in March, and we're already on it. So
that's right. What kind of upcoming events, speaking of, since we got happening?
Yeah, I'll tell you something really big in July that's going on, and it's every Thursday night, and it's at St. Francis Winery. I'll say this: we just tasted the J. Lohr rosé, this one right here, and J. Lohr was one of the wineries that I went on that cool cruise with, and the other one was St. Francis. So here I am with Chris Silva from St. Francis Winery and Steve Lohr and Lawrence Lohr, and we got to go over to Europe, and we were in Italy, Sicily, Greece, Montenegro. I could have really used a bottle of this. I was very, very hot there. It was about 97 degrees, and it was incredibly hot and very humid, and I needed something very refreshing. I ended up getting some beer, and it was very, very good at that time. But I will say this, what I do and the things that I share are really fun. But what Chris Silva and I are doing is the 7th year. I believe this is the 7th year of our film festival at St. Francis Winery. So 4 Thursday nights in July, we'll be doing that. It starts around 7, and there's a band always, and we'll be showing great movies this year. Cool. And I'll be doing a pairing with each one of the movies. So there's going to be some special wines that I'll tell you, some of these wines, they don't pour by the glass. They are a little bit more elite, expensive, but there's just reasons why we needed them. And when you know the president of the winery, and he gives you the green light, you got to like that. That's why you need to come and find out what we're talking about. So throughout July, there'll be some great offerings there at St. Francis Winery. So all those things are coming up. There's a lot of new things. This week, I'm working on a great story for Sacramento magazine. This is a new story on on traveling, and the article is basically on Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino, and Monterey counties. And for those people from Sacramento, last time I was on TV for one of the Sacramento stations when we did Flavor Napa Valley, and they did a great interview with me and some other people, including Tracy Dutton, who I work with at the Culinary Institute. We were being broadcast to 8 million people. So the impact of this next article is very big. So I'll be heading up to Mendocino County. So follow me on Instagram and definitely on Twitter and Facebook to find out more about what I'm going to be doing next week up in that special area in Mendocino County, which is Anderson Valley, and then going out towards the coast. So I'm going to be drinking a lot of these styles of wine up there. And the other thing is that for Anderson Valley, it's so well known for Pinot Noir, and I just got the chance to go up there to the Great Pinot Noir Festival up there. And that's just a fantastic area. And the other thing that Anderson Valley is very well known for is Alsatian style grape varieties. And so when we talk about Alsatian, we're talking about Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Muscat. Those are the 5 main ones from there. They're fantastic. They also have a little bit of Pinot Noir. Trying to make my magic happen. Ooh.
Well, for those of you listening,
Yeah.
not a big deal.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties here, but we're making it fine. So yeah, those are big things coming up this month, and I'm really enjoying them. Just some, there'll be a lot more to go through, but I'm working on some articles right now, and that's my main thing about my agenda for this month. So, yeah, so I've got one more ready for us, Adolfo.
Let's do it.
So another thing, and today I will say this, today is a big day in the United States, and it's Cancer Survivor Day. My mom died last year, and she died of cancer, and I feel for every family that ever had anything to do with cancer.
For sure.
Cancer sucks. Hashtag cancer sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great organizations that I judge for, and there's a lot of great new results coming out for wine judging events. Yesterday afternoon, I was in Napa Valley at 1111 Winery, and we got to give out some of the great prizes for the American Fine Wine Competition.
Oh,
and
nice.
that is done in Miami. And I'll say this, I got to go there in Miami. This is in the end of January when we judged, and great judges from across the nation, some of my great friends who were part of this. But I will say one thing, they raise a lot of money through this wine competition, and they're very different than some of the other wine competitions that just go through magazines or whoever. They actually raise money for cancer research, and they do it through the Miami Dolphins. I like the Miami Dolphins. They're not my favorite team because I live in the Bay Area, but I will say one thing. What they do with this money is very important, and that's why the Miami Dolphins have a great hashtag, Tackle Cancer. And so what I wanted to do is I grabbed a bottle of one of the gold medal winners.
Excellent. Let's see it.
This
Let's
is
see that bottle.
This is Fulcrum.
Fulcrum.
And it's a fantastic bottle. Oops, where am I going?
Nice.
There we go.
Yeah.
This is the Landy Vineyard, and this is from Russian River Valley, right in Sonoma County. This is the area where I grew up.
Wow.
I grew up in Russian River Valley.
We grew up.
We did.
grew
Sorry.
up.
That's right. Pioneer High graduate right here. And Pioneer High is definitely Russian River Valley.
Yeah.
Russian River Valley is very unique. It is a great Pinot Noir growing area, great Chardonnay growing area, but it also has Zinfandel. It's one of the only Pinot Noir growing areas in the United States. It's actually really the only of the main regions that actually grows Zinfandel there too. So there's a lot of great things about Russian River Valley and why you would want to go there and just have a great time with a lot of different styles of wine. Their Syrahs are great, like we were just talking about, the Rhone varieties. But Fulcrum is not that many people know about it unless you're in the business of buying wine like I am, as a sommelier for a long time. I got to know this brand a few years ago. I've got to hang out with the winemaker, and I know one thing about them. They really care about sites. And that's a very important thing with just Pinot Noir in general. Everyone will talk about clones of Pinot Noir, these plant material, and how they got it from the old world and how it's so great. But any winemaker will tell you sight trumps clone. And I don't mean that about President running guy Trump. I mean good stuff here. So this is the fulcrum, and let's taste it.
Let's do it. So for those of you, again, that are listening and watching, what's so cool about watching Chris in action is like when I see him at like these vineyards and at festivals, etc., is how down to earth, you are naturally, obviously, but how, you just click with these people.
Absolutely.
Whether it's winemakers or et cetera. And then you get in and you get all kinds of additional access and stuff. Obviously, their interest is that, you're a sommelier, you might do some writing on it too. Mm-hmm. But there's also that additional sort of like extra step where they're clicking with you. Right?
Yeah. And, that's a big thing about what I do. I love talking to people. There's no bad questions. There's never been a bad question about wine. Everyone, if you have a question about wine, there's a lot of people that have that same question about wine. So my job is to really fulfill people's needs to learn more. And I love it when people ask me great questions. So, when you tune in to me on this station and what we're doing, Adolfo and I are doing here, ask me those questions. Ask me it on, Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Ask me when you see me speaking at events. I just love it. So I got a lot to share with you. I just need someone to ask me that question so I can blab away about a certain subject. But Russian River Valley, where I grew up, where Adolfo grew up, we got lucky there. Back in the old days.
Cheers.
Back in the old days, it wasn't. It was a little bit different back then.
Smell that!
I know.
Holy moly!
It's been open for a day. This was at the big awards ceremony last night. And like I said, the American Fine Wine competition. And that's a great one. Let's see, what is the...
You can see that color. It's like a light
red
and kind of there. It looks much darker on camera than it actually is.
So the, let's see, it's American AFC and gala.com. That's what it is. So and gala. But you can look on there and find out all the winners. I took a great picture. I'm going to have that picture up this afternoon on my Facebook. So you can see some of the highlights and some of the great winemakers that were there accepting their presents, which are awards.
Good.
Because you got to like that. And, we did all those blind. And it is what we do in all competitions is blind tasting. So I love this nose here.
That tastes so great. Yeah, that nose is
deep berries, a little bit of blue kind of fruit too, that little bit of blueberry, but definitely that raspberry. And that raspberry is just so good. Plum, raspberry, a little touch of cherry, but a little bit of earth in there too. But boy, is that attractive. It is so good.
Yeah.
So let's taste it. The texture is beautiful. It feels so good in the mouth. You know what this really reminds me of, and what would be really nice with this? Chicken pomegranate chicken. I love that, especially with that little kind of spice that dish usually has. It's Armenian, usually is the way that it's prepared. If you go to a good restaurant that really knows it, Armenian spice, and I think this would really hold up well.
Yeah.
The good thing too about Fulcrum is if you get to Sonoma, the town of Sonoma, or the city of Sonoma, the historic city of Sonoma, I should say, they just started a new tasting room there, so you could buy this wine there.
Nice.
But the Landy vineyard is kind of right down, kind of towards the center of Russian River Valley. It's kind of in an open space out there. A few other people that I know get some fruit from there and do some vineyard designates, and it's a fantastic vineyard. Russian River has a lot of these special vineyards out there, and that's why I think that it's so special when you get out there and you get to really explore, and that's what it's about. And the great thing too about visiting Russian River is it's not just about the river, even though the river is fun. it is, there's a reason why Adolfo and I used to go swimming in there and go rafting, because it gets hot there in the kind of the more inland area.
Yeah.
But as you get out towards like places like Guerneville, you go to the Armstrong Redwoods, and that's a state park, and it's a fantastic redwood forest.
Yeah.
And there's just so many fun things to see out there in Russian River.
And just the air.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love it. It's good for your air, especially when you're coming from the cities, people.
And I will, with that being said, I will say one more thing too about Russian River and Sonoma County is mark it on your calendars now. Labor Day weekend, Sonoma Wine Country weekend. I will be part of that Superstar Somm team, the sommeliers from across the nation that will be part of that. And I'll be back on that team again, which is great.
Awesome.
I'm happy to be invited back. This is let's see, boy, it goes back about, this must be his 8th year, maybe 9th year. I helped start that whole organization as far as the Somm Stars team. And I haven't been on it for a little while just because I've been running across the nation, doing all sorts of fun things. But I'll say this, I'm honored to be back, and I can't wait to showcase what we're doing here in Sonoma County to more people.
That sounds like a blast. Yeah.
And the main event that everyone wants to go to is Taste. And Taste is at McMurray Ranch, and a lot of people might know when I say McMurray, you don't mean Fred McMurray, My Three Sons. Of course I do. That's where he retired. Ran his cattle out there. It is one of the greatest places you'll ever be in your life on that day. That is the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, and it is a fantastic event because it's not just about the wines, and it's not just about the atmosphere of being on Fred McMurray's property, or what was his property and now is property of the Gallows. And the Gallows do a great job preserving that. But more importantly, it's about something that places all up and down the West Coast are about, and especially Sonoma County, food. And that's great chefs that make great food with local products. And that you'll get to see exhibited left and right. Everywhere you find great wines at Taste, the Sonoma Wine Country Weekend event, you'll be turning right around and finding great food too.
And when is that again?
That is Labor Day weekend. So there's a lot of different events going on. You can look that up. Google Sonoma Wine Country Weekend 2016, and you will find the big list of great events. There's winemaker dinners. There's special events, kind of offsite. There's the taste. There's the auction. Big bidders. I mean, they come from all over the nation, and we are very high up there as far as the biggest wine auctions of them all in the nation. I mean, there's Napa, there's Naples, and there's Sonoma County. We're right up there at the top with them. So
it's amazing because all these places always have such unique stories in the people, and you always like tap into them. It's really cool.
Well, I'm lucky, that I'm able to. I've been getting invitations for a long time. When I worked at the Lodge at Sonoma for 10 years, as the sommelier there, I couldn't run away as much as I do now. But, when you get these opportunities to help great organizations, work with great chefs, and, I'll say one thing about what I do. It's really important for me to work with chefs. I can be an expert in wine. I can know a lot of stuff, but I know a lot about food, and it's because I've worked with great chefs, and they enjoy working with me. And
I would say a big percentage of like the photos that I see that you post are amazing food at these events too. So I'm like, I mean, Chris isn't only a wine expert, and to some degree, he's like a food expert as well.
Well, I'll tell you, in Telluride, it was the first dinner I'd ever done that was all caviar. 6 courses of caviar.
That's incredible.
It was so fun. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I just wanted more bumps. I wanted that little part of caviar here. I kept doing those bumps.
Caviar bumps.
Just wasn't
nice.
Didn't get my enough quantity. Last time I was with Frank Family Winery and Rich Frank and his wife. And his wife Leslie. I did a lot of bumps there, and that was really fun. But we'll bring it back in Telluride next year, and those chefs are off the charts good and what they can do with these kinds of wine and food pairings. And that's my job, is to help them get there and to make their food look fantastic. There's just a great story too. I will say this. today, or I guess it was last night, technically, wine industry website, which is just called Wine Industry News, I believe, came out with a great story. I was featured in it.
Nice. Congrats.
And some other great Somms across the nation. We really talked about this. Laura Ness.
What's the date today, by the way?
The date today is July 1st.
July 1st. So this is, as of this recording, July 1st, Chris is referring to.
Yeah, so July 1st. This just came out last night. And I didn't see it until I just tuned into Twitter, and people were using my name in that. So I was really happy to get that. And it came out today also in Wine Business Daily.
Great. And we will try to post all these links that Chris is referring to throughout the show in the show notes, just so everyone knows.
Yeah. So once again, we're talking about summer wines. Pinot Noir, great choice for summer. And why is that? You know, when we're in the summertime, we don't want these wines that are super huge. I mean, I like Great Cab. I like big wines. But the fact is that we're not trying to overwhelm ourselves right now. We're not trying to keep warm. We already are warm. We're trying to actually cool down a little bit. Yeah. And I think that that's why Pinot Noir is so important. It's so complementary to so many different types of food. Mm. And that's why, you know, when you taste it, and you do it with fish, and you do it with salmon, and you do it with all these kinds of things. You know, when we're up in Mendocino this next week, I think there's a really good chance we're going to take our boy Rupert to Fort Bragg. And you know what they're doing? They're firing their fireworks on the 5th of July. Yeah. That's a little different. That's a Tuesday night. Yeah. But it's because it's very family oriented out there. Right. And you know what else they do? They fish. So it's a salmon bake.
That's cool.
And so what a great night to be there, take a few good bottles of wine. I'll pull some stuff out of my cellar and I'll enjoy that moment up there with my family and having a good time. And I wish everyone that's watching this right now and listening right now on the networks a great 4th of July weekend. I mean, that's what I love about July is this is how we kick it off. It's an amazing event that goes on everywhere across the nation. I think we've all been to great things. You and I and our families spent last 4th of July right here in Marin. Yeah. Before that, I mean, I remember being in Sonoma County the week before, or the year before that. So just so many fun places to be with family, with friends, and with great wines.
You know, man, I was thinking about like you're starting this whole thing in myself, and my, you know, because I've been in the eye of the storm in terms of tech, right? Yeah. So I saw the .com 1, .com 2, and I was in the middle of it. I was at Mozilla parties 100 years ago, going to see Steve Jobs talk back when no one wanted to go see Steve Jobs talk. I would get him for free. There's no crowds and all kinds of stuff. And then seeing Chris at the epicenter of this whole wine movement when wine was not very sexy and just sort of coming into its thing, when Napa wasn't really as Napa as it is now. Hillsburg wasn't even on the map, really. No. Russian River, God forbid, as well. And Santa Rosa, or these places in Sonoma County that I'm talking about. And I'm sure Chris has a slew of other areas that have emerged
Paso Robles, like we were just talking about.
What's it been like for you, man? Because seeing it from when you got in this game and watching the storm all around you to today.
Yeah. Well, I'll say one thing. The wine industry has just grown. It's blossomed. We're all very lucky to be in America right now with wine. There's no doubt. It's not just here on the West Coast, but I was just talking with the great people from Virginia. Virginia is now number 5 in the United States for production of wines.
Wow, go figure.
And you know what? They do good ciders there too. They make great beers there. It is a food culture that I think has made the biggest difference in all of this. Sommeliers weren't anything back then. They really were not. I mean, yeah, you could go to the places that had very hoity-toity restaurants, and there were some very good experts there.
So what did you think when you were getting in the game then? Like, I mean, were you thinking, sommelier, boy, I'm going to really go all over the place with this?
It just become a key word back in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, Fred Dame, who is my mentor, Bob Bath, Evan Goldstein, 3 amazing master sommeliers, but they were in the early batches.
Right.
What we have now is sommeliers across the nation.
Everywhere. Yeah.
But the fact was we didn't have the food for the wines yet. And the food, you know, the trends that happen with food, and let's give a lot of thanks to Food Network and what I did with Food Network a couple years ago with Food Network in concert and being their exclusive sommelier and bringing in great wineries, Gloria Ferrer and Charles Krug and all sorts of, Hess collection and that we worked with. And we did these great, amazing things on stage, Foley and all their Pinot Noirs that I got to talk about, the Foley brands in Chicago. That was not there 20 years ago. If you really go back and you look at some of this stuff, what happened in the food culture, we're ripe right now for all of these great wines and to be talking about food on a regular daily basis. And that's why when I get to work with all sorts of different chefs and not, based at the lodge at Sonoma, that was 10 years that I got to work with Janine Falvo, who's a superstar chef. She's down in Long Beach right now, but she's a great one to follow, Janine Falvo. Right. But also, Andrew Wilson and all these other chefs I've been able to work with through the years. It's fantastic,
right.
And
but what I'm getting at is in these early days, you were doing it for the passion of it. You guys, these names that you put out are
I wasn't getting paid hardly
for the passion of all this, right?
So that was the great thing about it. When I got out of UC Davis, I was already committed to working with wine. It's because I grew up in Russian River Valley, and once I went to UC Davis, and I realized that that was one of the top schools in the world, not just the nation.
Right.
But that's where a lot of winemakers came out of. And I got to write about those things when I was at UC Davis. And coming and making that commitment to myself and saying, I'm going to go back, I'm going to write about wine in my home area, which is Sonoma County. And I did. And being with WineX magazine, which at the time, if you've ever seen a copy of WineX magazine, people still look at it like it's cultural anthropology, and it is because what we were doing, Adolfo, I took to a lot of those events, and they were so good.
It was so fun.
But I also got to fly all over the world because of WineX magazine and to explore these areas like the Rhone Valley, like we were just talking about, or Bordeaux, or going to hang out in Germany and go taste the Mosel Rieslings, with Ernie and all those kinds of guys, that are superstar winemakers and families that are really there. Wow. And it's important time, I think in the 90s. And actually at that point too, what was happening in America, especially on the West Coast, a lot of the grapes were, they had phylloxera. So they're pulling a lot of those grapevines out, or they just were diseased, or they had certain things that were going wrong with them. So
it was a rough time.
But it was a regeneration of the vines and learning more about those vines than ever before.
So transitional?
And so winemakers weren't just about winemaking anymore. They started getting out in the vineyards and they started doing these things. A great talent of a winemaker is to walk in a vineyard, take a berry, pop it in their mouth, chew on it, get the sensation of that, spit out the seeds. Spitting out the seeds is a very important thing because basically you're seeing, is it mature enough that we can pick this grape? In the old days, if the sugar was high enough, just pick it.
You're good to go.
It's fine. That doesn't mean that the seed is mature. A not mature grape or the interior of it, it's got green seeds. If they're mature, they're kind of beige color.
Right.
They're crunchy. So this wasn't being followed at all before that, before the 90s. And today, and what the levels of sugar, why acid means so much to us now, things have changed. And I'm just glad that I've been in it since the mid 90s.
Right.
And that's really where I've come from is, through UC Davis. And when I was writing those stories at Davis in the early 90s, and then getting into this and to watch the trends and how they've changed. And heck, talking about Vermin Tino and grape varieties like this that wasn't even really on the map back then. And you got Pinot that was back in the 90s. Yeah, there were some people that liked Pinot. They liked Burgundy, but they didn't get American Pinots. They didn't really understand American Chardonnays. And I think the Chardonnays are the best they've ever been in America right now. Wow. And there's a great new story coming out by me, and I believe that's going to be in the Somm Journal. I just turned it in last week. Thank God. Meredith, I got it to you, okay?
It just so happens it's by Chris.
I got it to you. That's when I was in Telluride, too. That was hard, all that travel and everything. Yep. But Pinot Noir, I think what we're looking at here and why we love it so much is we can talk about Pinot now. It's not about all those kinds of things. Like people just thought it was a wussy wine because you could see your fingers through it. And that's not the way it is at all. And you got to give some credit to Sideways in that great movie.
Oh, for sure.
And
but rosé now is kind of like that, kind of stigmatized, but it's not quite. But it's back in vogue to some extent.
Well,
too.
I'll tell you one thing about rosé is a lot of these younger kids that are now turning 21 to 25. They never knew the stigma. They just know that that's really refreshing stuff,
that's true.
And that they really like to drink these kinds of pink wines. So that's why
guy perspective,
there's a new market out there for it. You know what's great about rosés too, and a lot of people don't really think about this, but I do. At the very beginning of the year, and you're like, "Oh, Chris, that's the coldest time of the year. Why are you thinking about rosés?" Because I judged the San Francisco Chronicle wine competition, which is the first week of the year.
An amazing competition.
7,200 wines is what
That's
we
insane.
tasted this year.
That's insane.
There's about 60 judges, and there are a lot of golds, and each team tastes about 160 wines per day. 120 to 160. It's always 100.
Go back to Chris's Instagram history. He's got photos of insane amounts of glasses on tables.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But the fact is, a lot of these new producers of the rosés are great winemakers who are already great winemakers, but they started going to France and Italy and places like that in the old world more. And they realized that there's things other than white wines and red wines. It's called pink wines. And they are dry wines. And that's really what we've gotten into here in the United States. And the fact is, they're the first wines made every year because they're fresh and they're indicative of that vintage. And that's why we're tasting a 2015 right now that's tasting extremely good. But a lot of people release it at the very beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And so that's why it gets in the marketplace before almost anything. The only other wine that I think of that comes out about the same time is a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. If it gets no wood, if it's really done in stainless steel, it's going to be the first released of the year besides rosé.
Wow.
And that's why we know we can taste the vintage before. If you had a Cabernet and it gets aged in barrels for 20 months, and then you have to get it through fermentation, and then you have to age it in barrels for 20 months. And so what are we talking about now? We're talking about like 2017, 2018 for when it gets released. These are fresh wines that come out right after the beginning of the year.
Very nice, my man.
Yeah.
So what do you tell, like, speaking of young people, you brought them up with the rosés, and those, even, it doesn't even have to be young people transitioning careers or whatever, or people with just a general interest in wine, or perhaps making a career in the wine industry, whether it's somming or, winemaking, distribution, sales, getting in the game. Are you getting approached by people asking you about this kind of stuff? Or
of course. I mean, there's a lot of people, I teach classes. I get called into Sonoma State or UC Davis. I did some classes last year. Also Santa Rosa Junior College. A lot of people that taught me at Santa Rosa Junior College call me in to be a speaker.
Right.
And I talk to people across the nation about wine.
Yeah.
Number one thing that you'll ever learn about wine, you'll never know enough, ever. And that's why you got to keep learning about wine. You'll find the style that you like to drink, but that doesn't mean it's always the best thing to pair with different types of food. So that's for you to learn more about. As far as marketing wines and things like that, understand it's a very competitive world out there.
Sure.
People go, "Oh, I love wine. I'm going to start a brand."
Right.
You got to have a lot of money up front. You got to invest your heart and soul into it. I work with John and Nancy Lasseter, who are amazing people. A lot of people know John Lasseter from Pixar and from Bugs Life, Toy Story, Wall-E, all these great things. Their passion is wine, and I get to work with those wines. But
amazing. Yeah.
They know just as well as anyone that they're up against everyone else out there. So it's really finding the right people that like that kind of wine and that style, and tasting them with great sommeliers and having those sommeliers fall in love with that brand. And there's a lot of things that happen like that, and it's just learning the business takes years of experience. And if you love wine and you want to get involved in it, you can never take enough classes. You can never go to enough events. just keep going. I mean, keep tasting things you've never tasted before.
Like everything else, you just got to make a bunch of mistakes, right? Although in this game, it's tough because if you make mistakes, then
Yeah, well, selling it, and those kinds of things are hard.
Yeah.
There's brands, like being in Telluride, there was a few brands that are just imported into Colorado.
Mhm.
I didn't even know them. But there's small houses of Champagne and these kinds of places that were fantastic, but we never see them here on the West Coast because they're more about the middle of America. People in Texas, hey, a Picpoul wine, which is that wine I was talking about earlier. Picpoul is a varietal, Picpoul Blanc. It's a variety down pretty much around the Languedoc region, which is wrapping around the French Riviera. There was a white Picpoul from Texas that just won the San Francisco International Wine Competition with 5,000 wines in it. A Texas wine just won Best White in the world at that competition.
Amazing.
Who would have thought that?
Right?
Who would have ever thought that?
Yeah.
But you know what? It was delicious. And
Right.
I voted for it. So it got my vote too. But I think that when you really look at these things, Adolfo, we have experiences that people didn't have back in the 70s and even the 80s. Wine flights. Wine flights are fun.
Mm-hmm.
They give you an opportunity to try different brands, try different things, really get your head around how they taste and why one Pinot tastes so different than another, or why sparkling wines are made with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir if they're done in the method Champenois style, which is based on Champagne. But why do they taste so different? What is a Blanc de Blanc, and why is that all pretty much 100% Chardonnay? Why is a Blanc de Noir, almost 100% Pinot? Right. And why are they so different? And when you buy a bottle of that, which kind of dinner do you take it to? So it's finding these things out by going to classes, being an expert in it, and just committing yourself to learning more about wine. The other thing that I will say about this year, as we start this first episode of this whole series, this year, 2016, is a very important year. You know why, Adolfo?
Yeah.
And that is because this is the 40-year anniversary of the Paris tasting, which happened in 1976. It's when Chateau Montelena, their Chardonnay, and the Stag's Leap Wine Cellars Cabernet Sauvignon won over the French in a blind tasting.
Wow. There
was a documentary done, and Steven Spurrier is the person that put this together with others.
What's it called?
You mean the Judgment of Paris?
Yeah. Is that what it's called? The documentary?
Yeah. No, not the documentary. I can't remember the name of the.
We'll Google that.
Because I haven't found it yet,
and
I want to find it. But I played Steven Spurrier in that documentary.
No way!
I
wow.
did. We filmed it at the Mark Hopkins in San Francisco some time ago. It was about, I would say, about 8 years ago that we did that. And every now and then, people selling me wine would come in. They'd be watching KQED the night before and go, Chris, I just saw you in there.
Crazy.
I have a little allegiance with that. We also, for Flavor Napa Valley this year, we did an amazing dinner with the 8 wineries from Napa Valley that actually contributed their wines to that competition. And they went up against the best names in France, in Bordeaux, and in Burgundy. And you know what? They did great. And we're proud of what we do here in America. I'm proud of knowing French wines too. And the fact is that it's become much more of a global scale than it ever has been. And that's why we're talking about Vermin Tino and these kinds of grape varieties that are a little bit different than we would have thought about before. But here we are. We're tasting great wines. We're eating great food. Wine has become part of our lives. Right. And, it's not going to back down anytime soon. The fact is that American culture has gotten there. When I was with WineX magazine back in the 90s, I got to be honest with you, we were ranked down, we're below 250th in the world as far as a country and the consumption of wine. Now we're getting close to the 50th, and that's big, and you think about how far we've gone in the 20 plus years that I've been a part of it. I've watched it from the beginning, because you couldn't go much lower than that. I mean, and that's based on the consumption per gallon per person over 21 years old in the United States. we went from being pretty lame to being pretty awesome.
Mhm.
And it's because our wines have gotten better. Our culture has gotten more knowledgeable.
Right.
I
It's
mean,
just the evolution of the game.
yeah.
Right?
And it's like when I talk about food too, I ask this question often. It's a killer one because I always get people just going, And I said, do you remember Salisbury steaks? People go, oh God, yeah. Oh, because Salisbury steaks always tasted the same. There was nothing really special about a Salisbury steak. And that's what we grew up with in the 70s. And there were things that I can just say them and people just taste them because they're really typical.
Right.
They're just typical foods. What we have today, all over the nation, is great chefs that go to the Culinary Institute, that go to these great schools, that learn how to be pro chefs. I mean, I do a whole series of stories about them in the Cleaver Route, which is another great magazine to pick up. And I'm doing a new one on One Market and Keystone in San Francisco. When you go into these restaurants like Press in St. Helena and Plumed Horse in Saratoga and Zazu in Sebastopol, the last few that I've done this series on, these are star chefs. I mean, they're great chefs.
Yeah.
They're making food like you've only dreamed about. And what we get to pair these wines with today, it's unbelievable. We're in a very lucky state of affairs here in the nation as far as food and wine culture goes.
Yeah. So just to bring this as a bummer now, the bummer thing, you've probably seen a lot of wineries and businesses associated with the wineries come and go.
Yeah.
That perhaps that you loved or that you thought maybe you were concerned with or whatever. Can you sort of expand on your observations on why? And I'm sure there's a slew of reasons, this sort of happens to wherever it may be, these wineries.
Well, I'll say one thing is that there are monopolies in the wine industry. There are big companies that own a lot of wineries. They go in and they buy wineries that were very successful and they buy the names. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. Sometimes those wineries get lost, and sometimes those wineries they already have a name,
right?
But then they just make big, bulky wines based on that name, and that's what it gets associated with from that point on. That's why I think knowing your smaller wineries is more important than ever today. Learning these little small brands, family-owned operations.
Right.
Sonoma County is very good for that.
Yeah.
There's still plenty in Napa Valley, but you want them to be people that really go for the long haul. There's a lot of people that had a lot of money, and they come in, they made a ton of money. They've always loved wine, so I'm going to start a winery. Right. I'm just going to start it. I'm going to buy a killer winemaker to make my wine for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to get killer ratings. I'm going to do all this stuff. But then they don't realize that they have to hand sell this stuff. And
these are people probably that are used to winning.
Yeah, and there's a lot of times when those people will just finally bow out. And there's a great brand that I loved in Mendocino, Doctor, and they made amazing wines, and they just couldn't take it anymore. They just said, you know what, let's just retire.
That's it. Yeah, pack it in. Sure.
We got a bunch of wine to drink for the rest of our lives, but you come across these things and you wonder who's going to be next, but you also, at the same time, you're seeing all these cool young winemakers coming out of nowhere who you used to know. I mean, another good example from Mendocino County, Jason Drew. One of my favorite brands is Drew Wines. You go up there and you meet this guy, down to earth, loves what he does, great family, great wife, great kids, lives off the land. I met Jason down in Santa Barbara County when he worked for Babcock Winery, for Brian Babcock. And you know what? He was an assistant there. He worked in the cellar. And I'll never forget this time when I asked Brian, I said, Brian, I want to taste this one wine. Can you get like a finished bottle of it, like a new release, and then we'll taste it against what we've got here in the barrel? And he went and got it. And at that same time, here comes Jason. He swoops down and says, Chris, will you taste my wine? I said, yeah, go
right.
Thief, let's go taste this. I tasted his wine. It was very, very good. I said, so, wow, man, what's the story? He said, Chris, I love what I'm doing down here. I want to go up to your area. I'll see you up there soon. I said, oh, yeah, I'll see you up there. He's a big deal up here now.
Nice.
And these things happen. And these people come along, and when you meet them, get to know them, because they're going to be your friends for a long time. And I think that's a really important thing about this business, and especially what I do in this business is I use people as great resources, and they use me as great resources too. So it's a really important thing to follow these younger winemakers, and anyone will tell you that. Especially even aged, great seasoned veteran winemakers. I was just with Jim Clendenin from Aubin Clement, and what we did at the Chardonnay Symposium. That's a legend of the wine industry. There's no doubt.
That's a good idea. I mean, we could feature like a winemaker, a young winemaker of the week or something.
Absolutely.
In the future or something.
Absolutely.
Like that.
And I love them, and they already know me, and they know what I do, and I know what they do. And we like each other a lot.
That's awesome.
But Jim was the first to say, Chris, what's changed here is that we've got such young bloods out there, and they are following it. Things that we had to learn the hard way. Oh, they have to learn it the hard way too, but they have better material than we ever had when we started. And these kinds of grapevines now are healthier than they were back when we started. And the grape, the clones and the types of barrels and the techniques in the cellar are better than we had back then. And where we're going here in America is a great place. We're scaring the French. We're scaring everyone around the world because we're making great wines. And I think that the one thing that we have to really look forward to is the fact that our vines, in many cases, except for some of those old Zinfandel vines and Petit Syrah vines, which I love those, they're still young. And we don't even know the potential in some of these areas of how great they can be. You go up to Oregon's Willamette Valley. Some of the greatest Pinot Noirs of the world. When they have a great vintage up there, they're some of the greatest Pinot Noirs in the world. They're some of the greatest red wines of the world. But it's not every vintage. But when they are, they're among the best. And so knowing our vintages, knowing these things, knowing the places that are hot right now, following them, following crazy varieties like Vermin Tino, and why rosés are hot again, and why we do this, and why J. Lohr is an older brand. But guess what? The Jester and all these kinds of things, they're fun. All these things that we get to explore with our palettes and with our pairings and with our experiences. Get ready for more, especially with SawyerSomm.com.
That's right, SawyerSomm.com. In the news from Forbes, this July 4th, drink wine in a can or a box or a carton. Your thoughts on this stuff? We're seeing wine in a can now.
Well,
it was taboo to drink in the carton, and now it's become more acceptable. Now we're hearing about wines in a can.
Here's my thing, and I'll say it from a few different standpoints. First of all, when we do major wine competitions, just did the state fair, did the rosé competition, did the San Francisco International, all those results are out right now. Guess what? Some of the lower ends, they're coming out in boxes. And you know what? They're pretty good sometimes. Sometimes, not all the time. Now, my mother and father-in-law like boxed wines. It's cool. What if they like to drink that, then that's a good thing for them. Do I take boxed wines to them for holidays or when I just go over there? No. But if they drink wine on a normal daily basis and that's what makes them happy, that's awesome. And the other thing that kind of goes along the lines with the cans, and it's just that there's kegs of wine now. This is a very trendy thing. You just make fresh wine, put it in kegs, sell it to sommeliers, do it by the glass. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's good quality wine. So we're seeing a lot of trends right now, and I don't see that's going to back down anytime soon. Screw caps. People ask me about screw caps all the time. I love screw caps.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with screw cap. This is a screw cap.
I always compare this to like you used to have to dress up in suits to go to work, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't change the level of professionalness. I mean, go tell that to Facebook or Google or Apple, for God's sake, right?
Yeah, I mean, those guys are
silly.
They're silly. Those guys at Apple and those places, they have really good cafes.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to hang out with them
recently.
They're
kind of professional, a little bit successful.
Yeah, but they're also so cash because they don't have to overdress. They don't have to worry about primping their hair and doing all this stuff and making sure their shoes are shined.
Okay.
They have gyms. They have things like that. They get it when they're a little bit like having that brain freeze right now. Let's go to the gym. Let me just. I need a 45-minute break in the gym. And I'm going to come back. I'm going to be a much better person for that.
All right, next story in the news. Tennessee grocery stores begin selling wine. So Tennessee grocery stores sold their first bottles of wine Friday morning. Some stores have already begun stocking shelves while wine enthusiasts counted down the days. By law, stores begin selling wine 8 a.m. Walmart, Sam's Clubs, Costco, you name it, those guys seem to be selling them now. The change is 9 years in the making. This old vote here, and let's see, even though it's now legal to sell wine in grocery stores, or businesses must follow the same rules as liquor stores. That is to include no wine sales on Sundays and no purchases of wine past 11 p.m. Additionally, wine sales are not allowed on Christmas, Thursday, Thanksgiving, Labor Day, New Year's Day, upcoming 4th of July. So your thoughts on that, Chris?
The fact that they're selling it in that state is awesome. I mean, Tennessee is a very interesting state. You know, it's kind of that tobacco kind of influenced state. You know, we talk about bourbon, we talk about Tennessee bourbon versus Kentucky bourbon, all these things. One of the most interesting stories I will ever tell about the impact, it's not in Tennessee, but it's in Kentucky, is when I used to write for the San Francisco Chronicle. And they sent me back there to do a story on small batch bourbons. And I got to hang out with Maker's Mark and ooh, hey, ding, Maker's Mark, Jim Beam, all these things. And Booker Noe was the man for Jim Beam. He was the distiller. He was an amazing man. God rest his soul, because he's a really special man. Nice. At the time, Jim Beam owned Geyser Peak Winery in Sonoma County. And it was one of the most awkward things I've ever seen. It was Booker Noe. When we walked into his house, and the first thing he did is he gave us these little tastes of something that was clear. It was like Everclear. Oh. It was called White Dog.
Now you're talking my language.
And if you ever go to Kentucky and you say the word White Dog, just see what happens. Yeah. Most people will not think that you're referring to an actual animal. They will know that you are referring to what bourbon is before it picks up the color from the barrels. When it is just a distilled spirit and before it gets the color, that's what's different. Now, that was an interesting way. Took it, put it down pretty fast, got a smile real fast going on my face. By the time we had another cocktail, we sat down with Booker, me and some other members of the media. Sure. We got to sit there and go through a dinner with him. And at one point, there was wine on the table. And he was a little confused, a little uncomfortable. Didn't want to talk about it. Didn't know much about it. And that was my job. I stood up and I said some stuff on behalf of that brand and Geyser Peak. And Geyser Peak's a great brand. I mean, I still love that brand, and I still follow that brand. Ondine, the winemaker, is a great friend of mine. The winemakers back then, Chris Munsell and Daryl Groom and Mick Schroeder, they're all my great friends still today. But being an ambassador for them in a place I never thought I'd have to be one for them, but there with a person in Kentucky that was confused about wine, especially Booker Noe, that was an amazing part. You know, that's an amazing thing that I can say that I stood up for them. And I did a great job in broadcasting why people should be excited about this next round and why you're going to be tasting a great bottle of wine with this next course. And I think that's kind of what goes down through Tennessee right now, is that they're starting to learn how to love wine just like we do here on the West Coast, and most of the East Coast does. I mean, go to Florida and New York. I mean, you're talking about serious consumption of wine there. I mean, those are the places where America wines sell to. I mean, besides what we consume here on the West Coast, those are the biggest markets in the United States.
Right.
So,
well, in Tennessee too, they're dealing with their
Yeah.
cultural issues in terms of,
They
say
got-
no sales on Sunday.
they got some
and
religious issues
that kind
there
of
that
thing
they're dealing
happening.
with.
Yeah, of course, that's
but
a traditional thing.
their food is
Yes.
changing there too,
Yeah.
and things are working themselves
That's
out
neat.
there. But the one state, and I will say
I
this,
credit the internet for all this,
Yeah.
by the way. The dissemination of information is
the
wonderful.
greatest accomplishment in the United States, if you took one state and you said, I would want you to change, it's you, Pennsylvania. It's you. You.
What's up with Pennsylvania?
The government chooses the wines that you guys
Oh,
drink.
wow.
It's not you that
Oh,
chooses the
wow.
wines.
That's weird.
The
So
wines
they
that
must
come
have
in, they send their ambassadors over here.
That
I
means
used
they
to
must have a
entertain.
flourishing black market there then.
They do.
I would imagine. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, hey, working with Georges Perrier and Lebec Fin,
Yeah.
which we just did that great movie there in Telluride. He had the same thing he was dealing with. I mean, he had made some of the best food in the world, and especially in the United States. It's one of the greatest restaurants that's ever existed in the United States, and he owned it since 1970 until he sold it. Was it 2 years ago? He raised 2 top chefs on TV. 2 top chefs, not one, but
Right.
2. And his book is great, and just hanging out with him. I mean, what a pleasure. You can see a picture of me and him on my Instagram too, on Sawyer Sommelier for Instagram, and that was just great hanging out and sitting next to him at dinner and picking his brain.
Yeah.
But guess what? He didn't have the liberal rights to buy wines like we do here.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's a different thing. And
Yeah, freedom.
when these states change, we make wine in every single state in the United States, and even outside the United States. Guam makes wine. Guam. All these places that we have that are under U.S. control,
Right.
we all make wines.
Yeah.
There's wines everywhere. They're just different versions of wines. Obviously, the West Coast makes the most wine of any area in the United States. California, about 90% of what's made in the United States comes out of California.
Right.
And we're lucky. And that's why people come here all the time. But the fact is, they do great stuff in upstate New York. They do great stuff in Texas and in Virginia and obviously Oregon, Washington, and other states. One time we had one of the white wines that won a competition we did. It's from Nebraska.
Right.
Nebraska.
Right.
Unbelievable. So I just think that what we're doing right now is special. And I think we're going through it together, and I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Speaking of special, let's look at hardware. You have this piece of hardware to your right. What is this thing?
You'll
have to describe it for the people that are listening and not visualizing this. Can you describe it for them?
If I'm not mistaken, it's called Shin, and I'm gonna make sure here on my little notes that someone did send me something here.
I'll show you guys. It's fairly heavy. It's beefy.
It's beefy.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's about about 1.5 feet, maybe a foot long.
Yeah. Looks like I should be playing like a.
It's like a weapon.
Or
it's
maybe smoking something
or it can
out of it.
protect you, or it's like a gear shift.
Yeah. You know what this thing does? This is one of the greatest examples out there, and I will put this on when we put the notes up there too.
Yeah.
One of the great things about this, and why I brought it over to Adolfo's house, is this bottle was not chilled yet. I keep this in the freezer, and it freezes this part right here.
Okay, describe this to the people listening.
So it freezes
There's
this.
long metallic.
It's metallic. It has a little grate right here.
Yeah, on the top of it.
Yep. But what happens
near
is
the top.
You freeze it, and when you need something chilled very, very fast,
you drop
it in there, and it's frozen matter,
right?
And it takes care of it from the inside out. It actually has a nice little spout, so you can pour right out of this thing.
Oh, wow.
First time I ever used one of these, it was up at Ironstone, up in the Calaveras County, where my grandfather was born. My wife and I, it was a hot day, and I remember our boy Rupert was a little loosey-goosey, just needed to play around. My wife just said, go get us a bottle of wine. We could use one right now. And so I went there, and we needed something a little bit more chilled than that. And they let me use one of these. They said, here, just use this. Go put this in there. It'll be chilled down shortly.
Wow.
And sure enough, and it was easy to use. It's a great product, and I'll have some more information about this up on my website shortly.
In the show notes, we'll have it there.
So
Very cool.
yeah, fantastic. I would say this is a great present for anyone, especially during the summertime.
Great gift idea for your 4th or your next holiday that's coming up whenever you watch this. So, Chris, anything else? Events? Anything happening up? Anything? Where can they get more information on Chris Sawyer?
SawyerSomm.com, obvious.
SawyerSomm.com.
Yeah. So
if you're listening,
like Tom Sawyer, every now and then I'll play that on there on the site. But you can follow me in all the events that I'm a part of there. The calendar actually on that site is extremely good.
Okay, good.
And it shows where I'll be and what I'm a part of or what I really would want people to go to. There's some ZAP stuff coming up.
What does ZAP stand for those people
Zinfandel Advocates and Producers. So there's going to be a nice tasting coming up in August that I'm going to be a part of. I will get you more information about that shortly, but you can look it up under zinfandel.org, but it'll be in Sonoma County. We have more things coming up. One thing, actually, I can't leave this out. On the 15th of this month, that's coming
July.
up. Yeah, July. It's coming up in just a couple weeks. The 50-year anniversary of Robert Mondavi Winery.
Wow, that's huge.
That was in 1966 that the first vintage was made. I got the chance to go there just recently and taste through verticals.
Can you pass that bad boy?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
I got to taste through some extremely delicious wines with them. Delicious wines. We keep saying that. Hello, 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 hello. But I think that's a really important winery that everyone should be focused on. This is a big year for Napa. Let's just put it that way. 1976 Paris tasting, 40-year anniversary of that. 50-year anniversary of Robert Mondavi Winery. It changed Napa. It changed Napa from the 70s when I remember growing up and going there and seeing a bunch of produce everywhere, seeing cows, sheep, everything there. Napa Valley is now a world-class region for growing grapes.
So would you compare it to like Beatles before they took acid and went to India, and then Beatles after? From Beatles, yeah, to
the acid did.
I Am the Walrus.
Yes, yeah, I would compare it to that. Yeah, it was very nice before that, and there were great wines before. The 76 Paris tasting. There were great wines, and things have changed, and we will talk more about that in the show. I really do want to bring those points up and
music,
and we will bring up more
pairings.
Music. We will do all that stuff. We will bring food on. I'll bring chefs on. I will bring winemakers. We will do it all.
We'll do it all.
But the fact is, it's a big year for Napa Valley, and if you get the chance to go there, go there. It's an important place. Come to Sonoma County for Sonoma Wine Country Weekend. Go to San Francisco for staying overnight down there and going to these great restaurants that they have there and tasting wine flights. Go to Paso Robles. Go to Washington State to taste some of their own varieties, or go to Willamette Valley in Oregon and taste Pinot Noirs that'll blow your socks off. Go to Virginia, just because Virginia's cool and they're doing great stuff with wine. Get excited about wine because there's plenty to be excited about.
That's right.
For sure.
So thanks everyone for watching. And for those of you watching, thanks for your patience with the camera issues. We will resolve all that stuff. For those of you listening, I am Adolfo Foronda, the guy over here, and A Foronda at Twitter, or at Nerdstalker on Twitter. And you are?
Chris Sawyer, SawyerSomm.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Sawyer Sommelier and Twitter as well, Sawyer Sommelier. And on Facebook, it's Christopher Sawyer Sommelier.
Beautiful. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time, for watching and listening. See you next time.
Cheers.